What should the legislature do to address affordable housing in District 42?
Well, I think that we have to understand how affordable housing affects whole state and how the suburbs handle it, urban Minnesota and rural Minnesota. In my first year in office, I was the author of the largest single increase in addressing the issue of affordable housing by adding $26 million to the base to really begin that discussion. The problem is that unlike, well, sadly, like many things, it can't keep up with inflation. And so what we're spending money on then doesn't necessarily stretch the dollar now. We need to be taking a look at how do we make sure people have affordable housing on a scaled sense, right? So folks that are earning a certain amount of money are able to get into homes that they can afford, understanding that middle class has some of the same struggles, right? Based on where they're gonna go. For example, Shoreview and the Moundsview area, property values are skyrocketing because everybody wants to be in the Moundsview School District. And that's been something we've been seeing and talking about for quite some time in Shoreview, which then prices people out of being able to move here. And I think that's unacceptable. I think if people want better education for their children and they move here, this is a prime opportunity for them to be able to do that. We have to find a way to make that work within the city government and the local control that they have. And so I think that's something that we're really trying to understand. I've been on the housing committee now more years than not and my time in the legislature. And I can tell you that this particular question is so multifaceted because you look at better housing for economic reasons, better housing for social reasons, for school board reasons, and then, or being on the school, in the school district, and then looking at across the state, different places have such a variety of needs. It's really tough to fit all this in, as Ben talked about, in a minute and 30 seconds, but that's all I got, I guess. I'm stopping.
Ben Schwanke.
You know, this is where I think everything comes back to balance. And that's, once again, that's pretty much my philosophy with everything. Being a math teacher, I know one side to the right or to the left is too far, right? It's always about coming back to the middle and what can we do to balance. And so that's where I believe the legislature needs to find a balance in our housing crisis, because we absolutely do have one. When you look at our rental rates or our home property values compared to the surrounding states, we are astronomically higher than most of them. And now there's certain pockets of, you know, in parts of each state that, you know, are more affordable, but overwhelmingly our rent is just astronomically through the roof. I was just talking to one of my friends who lives in Minneapolis, where him and his roommate each pay $1,800 a month for an apartment. That's more than I can afford on my teaching salary, and I can't imagine how they live there. And I know that, like Senator Isaacson said, that trickles out from downtown throughout the rest of the suburbs and then into the rural areas. And so we have to look at what is really causing this and making sure we are striking a balance of making sure we support and fund the areas that we need to be funding, and then also making sure our regulations are the appropriate level of regulations. And that's where we have to, once again, look and find that balance, because not enough regulations is going to lead to unsafe housing, and too much regulations are going to see an increase in price also. And so once again, it's finding that balance of regulation and funding.
Anything further?
Yeah, I think I would just draw the contrast that, you know, I understand and agree in a sense of what Ben is talking about, that balance is important. And I think it's a fundamental thing we can all agree with, right? It's a very interesting and clear point to understand. Having actually been in the trenches and worked on this issue, I can tell you that it's super complex. And we have the Minnesota Housing Authority that handles a lot of the finances that go on with that. And we have counties that have their own specific rules. And we have Shoreview and Roseville and Little Canada that have their own rules. And really what it really comes down to is having a dedication of people working together locally, countywide, and statewide, that are really focused on the same thing and making sure that we provide opportunity. And part of it has to do with providing affordable housing, but the other part of it that hasn't been mentioned is providing for an economy in which people can make enough money to afford housing. And that's the other side of it that I want to be looking at. And I would love to have more time to go into that, but we're out of time.